Hi. Well, what would be most helpful today?
Um, honestly, I'd love to get just kind of little bit of feedback on kind of a couple of different things. I've
Yeah.
been slowly working through the program over the last year, and it's
hmm
been kind of like a lot of bits and pieces here. I've never been able to just sit down and do it.
hmm
Of course, setting this up gave me motivation. Okay,
Right?
well, I actually got to like start going through it. And I guess the my first question is I'm a little stuck on differentiating between kind of my niche and the ideal client. And I
Okay.
feel like I've kind of, I've done the worksheets, I've kind of narrowed some things down, but I feel like am I leaning too much into the ideal client? Am I not leaning too much? Am I not enough in the niche? Kind of wondering if I could get like some feedback around that.
Yeah. Love that. Tell me about both of them.
Okay, so um little bit of background, very heavy in trauma. My background's in disaster and humanitarian psychology, so I
Whew.
um bring to the table like a lot of like grief and trauma. That's
hmm
what I love. I live and swim in it.
hmm
And I've noticed the last couple of years I've done different offshoots with a little bit of both. So
hmm
like I've found myself, one of my passions is climbing, and so I've kind of connected with the climbing community and supporting kind of grief and trauma in kind of like that capacity. And
hmm
then a lot of my background comes from like hospice work, and so kind of like a lot of death and dying, chronic illness. And so I've noticed kind of it's a sweet spot between the two of like helping people with kind of sudden or traumatic grief or loss, and
hmm
then kind of helping people navigate their kind of chronic or recently diagnosed illnesses. And
Okay.
so that seems to be, and to be perfectly honest, I just narrowed this down in the last probably hour of doing
Love
some of the
it.
worksheet work.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I guess now for me, it's like, so I've narrowed that, but then also look at some of the worksheets now speaking to that. I
hmm
guess understanding that and then taking that to like some of my marketing and my website, like what I guess maybe from here, where do I go?
Yeah. So I think like the difference between the niche and the ideal client is your ideal client is a part of your niche. And the only reason for an ideal client is to make marketing easier.
Okay.
So it's really just to make it so that when you're writing, like you are writing to Mary, whose husband had a heart attack out of nowhere, and she's now having to like reform her whole life around not having him and continuing on somehow, right?
Okay.
And
Right.
because that copy would be really different from um Bernice, who just got diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer.
Right.
So figuring out who your ideal client is allows you to speak to that one person and makes it just like it's just easier. So what
Sure.
we can do is with yours, there's enough overlap between the emotions of those people that I think we can speak to the feelings and then give the examples of the kinds of clients that may come in to see you.
Okay.
Um, so like you could talk about how it feels like your world stopped, but everybody else has kept going.
Hmm.
Um, that like it hurts to see people walking around as if everything is normal.
Yeah.
Um, that like you're not quite sure you're still yourself anymore. So like some of the
Sure.
identity pieces that go with either a really traumatic experience of being diagnosed with something or a loss that was like your person or a
Right.
child or
Right.
um and you know all these things way more than I do. I'm too scared to touch grief, to be honest with you. Like when it comes up with somebody I've been working with, I'm like, okay, I guess I'll go here. But my husband laughs at me. He's like, You talk so much more openly with our children about sex than you do about the fact that you may die someday. It's like, could you even it out some?
You're just being in the present moment. That's
Yeah.
what you're juggling there.
Like, we don't need to talk about when I'm gone. So, um, yeah. So thinking about those daily, like new daily lived experiences, their entire life is
Mm,
different now than it was last Tuesday.
sure.
And just the shock of that.
Right.
So speaking to
Right.
that, and then you can say, this is these things are especially true for my clients who just received a um, terrifying diagnosis. They're true for my clients who've just lost somebody that was one of the closest people to them, or someone they had an estranged relationship with and always meant to see if it could always work out again. So that kind of
Sure.
like really complicated grief.
Totally.
Um, so you can give those examples after you've described the emotions that are kind of shared amongst this group of people within your niche.
Okay. Okay. So if I'm hearing it correctly, kind of focusing more so on the emotional experience that the emotional experience that they'll experience, and
Yeah,
kind of focusing on that and kind of identifying maybe like the subsets from there.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think that's something that, I've struggled with because it seems like there's definitely overlap kind of between the two kind of areas that I find myself like really doing good work in, and that's where I love to focus on. But I guess I'm concerned like if I don't speak enough to one versus the other, or if it's split evenly, like does that matter? I guess you know part of it might even be a little bit of lifespan. Part of it is
Mhm.
recent, and then potentially supporting someone post death. Um,
Mhm. I feel like
so
that depends on your ideal client for sure. Like you can have an
okay.
ideal client for somebody who just lost somebody, and you can have an ideal client for somebody who was just diagnosed with something. And think about how they would feel seeing the other person's experience written down on your website. Do they feel like it's taking up space that should be theirs and they're kind of begrudgingly reading it and feeling more distanced from you? Or are they
Mm,
like, yeah, that person gets it. That person gets like that other potential client for him. Like I just lost my husband to cancer and he also helps people who just got diagnosed with cancer.
mm,
So it could be that there's like empathy for the other description, or it could be
sure.
like, I just need my own damn space. Like, why can't I have my own space in this hell? So
Right.
it depends on your person.
That's a really good distinction. Thank you. I hadn't thought about that before.
Yeah,
That's super helpful.
absolutely.
If I were to kind of like market to kind of like both of them, would you suggest like having like on the website on my website, like having the main page be kind of like, you know, trying to speak to both of the kind of like major themes of the experience, and then have like separate pages for each of them?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because you'll be able to go in so much deeper about
Okay.
the things that are essentially going to show them that you know what you're doing.
Sure.
Um, so, excuse me. So if you're able to really like talk about the emotional, like talk about what we talked about with the homepage, but then they are so different. The feelings are so similar. The trauma
Right.
is so similar, but it is such a different experience for each of those people, and that gives you the opportunity to really dive in.
Sure. Sure. Okay. Cool. That's super helpful. That's super helpful. Sometimes it's just like super nice, like talking about this thing out
Yeah.
loud. Like, you know,
Yeah.
you
I
got
have
it.
a
This is why you
theory
do the
that,
program.
yeah, I think I have a theory that like most therapists are verbal processors, and that's why we appreciate therapy so much.
Definitely. Definitely. Okay. Cool. That was super helpful. I guess I did have another question kind of about website work. So I found myself, I had created my website like I want to say maybe like 5, 6 years ago. And it
Mhm.
was I did it on Squarespace, pretty and I don't want to say like a plain template, but it was one that felt resonated to me at the time.
Mhm.
And now I'm getting new headshots done. I want to update some kind of like content and flow. And uh there's a part of me that has seen a lot of like therapist websites out there with the same, like it's kind of a similar theme.
Uh-huh.
And that uh teenage rebel in me is very much kind of like, no, like
Uh-huh.
it's to me it's almost like a little too polished, and I think that's just, from my taste. um how have you come across that with like therapists in the past who are like trying to revamp their websites, and we see these things, they're like polished versus building off of what we already have. How would you kind of approach that?
I think with your ideal clients, I'd stay polished simply because in my mind, polished means clean and easy.
Sure.
Um, like I don't like a thing that's too pristine, to be honest with you. Like I don't like a town where everything's perfect. I like things a little bit scruffy.
Right.
But I think that there's a certain amount of like making it really easy for them. So recently I saw somebody with like textured background in the background of their website. And I was like, I think I would prefer it to be just white. I'm gonna recommend just white. Um, because they're not interested in unique your ideal clients. Like if you were like, I work with rebels who would never work a 9 to 5, they're artists, they're creators, then I'd be like, go
Right.
wild, be bright, be different. But I think your people, there's so much chaos going on in their internal
Right.
world and probably external
Sure.
world too, that something simple is probably best.
Okay. Yeah, my background is black and white with pictures here and there, so that maybe I'll keep it simple in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
um okay. um I guess building off of that, given 2023, kind of like what you're seeing on people's websites now, and I know I've looked through the kind of website section
Mhm.
that you have in the program. um it seems like I'm seeing people kind of, or at least therapists, kind of have a little bit more less and less like, you know pages on their websites, and keep it kind of really really simple. um I'm just wondering, like, given what I've talked about, like with, with how, where I want to focus, would there be sections that you would recommend that might be helpful in terms of marketing to kind of like have on my website? I don't know, like resources, or something, something else
Mhm.
that may might jump to you.
I wouldn't have resources on there that aren't created by you. Because we want to
Okay.
keep people on our websites. Um, like a one pager could be fine as long as there are still menu items up top to jump them down to the different sections they may be interested in.
Okay.
Um, and having the homepage, the about me, the services page, a contact page. Like I would say those, I'd keep it really simple in that way. I wouldn't have a bunch of menu items.
Okay.
Um, Yeah, and I see like a really common one is like the big picture across the top, or with like words on top of it. And I know like it's like, yeah, yeah, we've seen it a million times, but part of the reason we see it a million times is because it's effective. So
Right.
yeah. So maybe Yeah, maybe have a side website just where you get to go wild, but
Okay. That's fair. That's fair. Um, okay. And then I guess kind of building off of, once I've kind of revamped that and kind of narrowed it down, um, I I've reduced the number of directories that I've been on the last couple of years, and
Mhm.
um, I think there's two that I'm connected to that are related to organizations that I don't that are free to me, so I'm not too worried about that. But the main one that I have right now is Psych Today,
Mhm.
and um, I guess my question with what I'm describing as like where I plan to focus um, marketing for Psychology Today, would you recommend almost like less is more in terms of like, kind of
Mm.
with Psychology Days, like all the categories, all the specialties, kind of all of that
Yes.
stuff? Okay.
Yeah, in terms of their checkbox stuff, check as few as humanly possible. Like,
Okay.
because your ideal client knows why they're coming in. This isn't one of those situations where they think it's anxiety, but it's really trauma, right? Like,
Right.
your person is coming in because of traumatic grief and loss.
Right.
And I would make sure that your very first sentence makes that so screamingly clear.
Okay. That's super helpful. Because I've wondered, like, you scroll down and it's like, everyone has all the check boxes,
Right.
checked.
Ugh.
And I'm like, since I'm niching down, should I just do just the ones that I'm trying to niche to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Okay.
it's interesting because people who check all the boxes will sometimes say, like, well, I get so many views on my Psychology Today, but nobody calls. And it's like, well, because they're searching for grief, but you're talking about anxiety. Like
Right.
you check the grief box, man. Like,
Right.
so yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Um, I guess the other question that I guess I was wondering about, should the copy that I'm doing on my website, should that match exactly what I have on Psych Today and vice versa?
I wouldn't.
Okay.
SEO doesn't seem to like that. And so it might
Okay.
make your both of them or one of, well, it would make your website show up less because Psychology Today is very powerful SEO wise. So I would have
Right.
it slightly different. Same vibe, of course, but
Okay.
slightly different.
Okay. Cool. That's super helpful. Let's see. I think I had one other main question that came up. Um, as far as um, referral sources, I guess some of the Psychology Today stuff, some of the reasons why I'd questioned about it kind of fizzled out for me over the last, like, I'd say like 6 months or so. I think um I don't want to say it's like dried up, but it's like very few far in between, and I've focused on more, I would say, like more directed kind of networking. And so I've
Mm-hmm.
I've been very involved with like local groups, Facebook groups, listservs and stuff like that, and have been like successful so far with that. Um, and I've been very hesitant on doing things on social media specifically for my practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just starting to like dip my toe into that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, any thoughts on like starting with that? And if you were to do things all over again to market your practice in 2023, where would you start on that?
I don't think I'd do social media at all
Okay.
if I were starting my practice right now.
Okay.
Because it is so much more time consuming than everything else. Like
Okay.
we might have like old social media for my practice, but not really. It's just so
Okay.
much more time consuming. You've got to create so much content. You've got to like you often build slow. Um, the majority of people who are using social media to market their practice are not getting clients from it. There are people who do, absolutely, but they can be doing the same exact thing as somebody who hasn't gotten results. Like following the same exact steps, using best practices for social media, and they may get there eventually, but often it's just not the best way. So
Okay.
I would lean hard onto networking. I'd get my website really great. I'd consider relevant directories. Like if there are any traumatic grief based directories that if somebody's Googling around, they might find, I might get on that.
Okay.
If you like public speaking, there might be some speaking opportunities that could drive clients. Um,
I've done a few workshops and kind of webinars around that. And that
Perfect.
seems to, I've gotten a couple clients through that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think networking is going to be your biggest source of clients, like the networking in combination with your website.
Sure.
Um, because most therapists don't know how to handle that kind of acute traumatic grief.
Right.
Um, I mean, some of us like me aren't even great with just regular old fashioned grief, right? And so I think most therapists would take somebody who, again, I'm actually thinking about like a situation with a friend of mine who recently lost her husband to suicide, and how it was really hard to find her a therapist who felt
Sure.
equipped. And I was clear, like, I'm her, you know, we live a few doors down. I definitely can't do it, even if I had the skill set. But to
Right.
try to find a therapist that I felt confident could handle that and still be okay themselves. Because I think
Right.
there are some who would, but maybe shouldn't, was
Right.
tough. And finding care for her kids, like it's rough out there when
Yeah.
you have somebody that needs really specialized care in this way, because most of us aren't it. There aren't enough of y'all.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's like networking with other therapists, networking with psychiatrists. You're already connected to hospice, and they have their own in-house services essentially that they are going to probably
Yeah.
keep in-house. But if there are circumstances where you'd be a better fit, it's good for them to know about you, or to
Sure.
know what you're up to.
Right.
Um, I'm thinking about oncologists, hospitals. Yeah, I think about like we have a, I don't know if it would make sense. My neighborhood has its own police force. We're technically like a town. And so
Okay.
I went into hardcore social worker mode when this happened, because then I didn't have to feel. So I was like, I like got in touch with the chief of police, and I'm like, how are y'all doing? Can I give some referrals to you? Like that we have like first responder. This is not your typical call in our neighborhood. Like we have these
Right.
first responder services in town. I'm happy to refer, like, so the ancillary people who might have also really struggled with
Yeah.
whatever happened, even if they weren't super close.
That's a great idea. Now, like let's say oncologists, neurologists, kind of hospital systems. Um, I have a background in grassroots organizing, so often I would like, you know, show up and try
Uh-huh.
to, meet with someone and try to have a conversation. But in this day and age, would you recommend, that tactic, cold calling, emails, postcards, like what would your thoughts be on that?
I would call, if it's like a separate system, like if it's like an oncology clinic that's associated with the hospital, I might call the clinic and ask to speak with the referral coordinator. Like have it written out, because medical model is so succinct. So have it written out what you're going to
Right.
say. So if you get
Right.
connected to them, you can just say like, here's what I offer. I wanted to find out how to get on your referral list, essentially.
Okay.
Um, because not every referral they make is going to go to hospice, right? Like they're seeing things that they might not have the services for in the hospital.
Mm,
If it's like kind of in-house in the hospital, I might talk to a hospital social worker to ask like just call the front desk of the hospital. I don't know what it's called.
right.
And say like, I'd love to speak with a hospital social worker. Because they're often the ones making referrals
Sure.
and coordinating care.
Okay. It's a good recommendation. Also chaplains too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool. That's so helpful. Thank you so
Yay.
much.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. I'm so glad you're out there doing this work because, like I said, many of us can't or won't. And people need support during like what is the hardest moment of their life. So,
Right. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. I'm here for
Yay.
it.
Good. Awesome. Well, keep us updated about how it's going in the Facebook group. Like hop in and let me know. And if you hit snags with any of it, like if your hospital system is different from mine, there's so much so much great information from your peers in the group that may have different kinds of
Sure.
experiences. So
Okay. Cool.
awesome. Yay. Thanks, Zach.
Thanks so much, Allison. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.